I'm a big fan of saying start with whatever the simplest tool or simplest system that will get the job done for you, and only get more fancy if you find that you need it.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I am co-presenter, and today Jo is interviewing Laura McClellan. Jo has been listening to Laura's own podcast, The Productive Woman, for many years and often wanted to invite her onto ours. She finally decided to just ask, and here we are, and, as you'll hear, Jo is a bit of a fan of Laura's. Laura is a lawyer, a writer, a productivity enthusiast and a tech geek. Married for more than 40 years to her high school sweetheart, with whom she's raised 5 amazing kids, she's passionate about encouraging women in their individual journeys as people, wives, mothers, and citizens. For the past 6 years, Laura's hosted The Productive Woman, a weekly podcast about productivity for busy women. The Productive Women exist to help the listener find the tools and encouragement she needs to manage her time, life, stress, and stuff so she can accomplish the things she cares about and make a life that matters. To further that goal, Laura facilitates mastermind groups and offers personalised productivity coaching for women who are seeking support, encouragement and accountability in identifying and pursuing their most cherished goals. Laura and her husband Mike live in rural North Texas, where they're Yorkie and a cranky calico cat, and they always look forward to visits from their grown children and their 8, so far, grandchildren. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Laura McClellan of The Productive Woman. Thanks for joining me, Laura. It's great to speak to you after all this time of listening to your podcast.
Well, I am delighted to be here, so thank you for having me.
So start by telling us a bit about who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Well, I am I live in North Texas in the United States. I am a lawyer by training, and that's my day job. And I practice real estate law, working with commercial real estate clients. And then on the side, so to speak, I host a podcast, as you mentioned, called The Productive Woman. It's about productivity for busy women. And, in connection with that, I kind of have a community of people that have grown up around that, and I interact with them. I do some productivity coaching and host masterminds from time to time, and just that sort of stuff. And on the personal side, I've been married to my husband for over 40 years. I always like to say I was a child bride. We were 18 when we got married, and we have 5 grown children and 8 grandchildren so far. So.
Wow. A whole community.
Yes.
So I've always been intrigued, and I don't know if I've ever sort of heard the story about how you ended up doing the Productive Woman work, because, as you say, you're still a lawyer and you still actively do lots there. I mean, when I listen to you, sometimes I hear how busy you are, and yet you're doing a lot with the Productive Woman as well. So how did that come about, and how do you sort of manage the two together?
Oh, great question. I started podcasting. So the Productive Woman launched almost 6 years ago. It will be 6 years on July 1st of this year. And at the time I was, much newer lawyer and spending a lot of time with my legal practice. Anyone that knows lawyers know that the practice of law can consume your life if you let it. And I was kind of looking for something to do that wasn't related to the practice of law. And right around that time, a blogger that I followed announced that he was launching a podcast, which is something I'd never heard of. But because I liked his blog, I decided I would check out his podcast. I started listening to that. From there, I found a couple of other podcasts that I liked, and I got to thinking about maybe that would be something I could do. I like to talk. It would be something that I thought I would enjoy. And when I thought about what I would podcast about, the obvious choice kind of for me was something related to productivity, because I've been a productivity nerd since I was, in middle school. I've always enjoyed reading books and about productivity and managing calendars and charts and all that sort of thing. And so I just decided that would be the direction I'd go. I took a course from Cliff Ravenscraft, who is at the time was known as the podcast answer man. And he had a 30-day course that took you from idea to a launched podcast. And so I kind of learned how to do it from him, and the rest is history, I guess.
And you didn't just stick with the podcast. You've created a whole community around it, and you, as you've mentioned, do the masterminding as well. So it's almost like that thing about give a busy woman, if you're going to give anything to anyone, give it to a busy woman, because you fitted yet more in.
Yeah, well, my reason for doing it in part was, that is the podcast, was because I wanted to help. I came to the practice of law later in life. I had already had my children and, done other things in life. And over the course of my career, I had many opportunities where young female lawyers would be in my office talking to me about how do you practice law and have a family? These would be young women who were considering having a child or had their first child and trying to manage all that. And I really enjoy helping people. To me, the value of the podcast isn't even so much that I like to sit in a room once a week and talk to myself in front of a microphone. But I wanted from the very beginning to hopefully create a community of women who could support one another in trying to make meaningfully productive lives. It's, 21st century life is hard. There are so many opportunities, so many commitments that we make. And my experience and the conversations I've had with women over the years is a lot of times we feel like whatever it is we're doing, we're not quite doing it right. And that everybody else has it figured out, and we are the only ones who are struggling. And what I wanted to do was make a space where we could say, you know what, we're all struggling. Nobody has all the answers, but if we put our heads together, if we can be transparent and open with one another about what works and what doesn't work, we can share ideas, and every one of us will have a better opportunity to make the kind of life that we want to do. And so that was kind of the impetus behind the podcast. And from there, it grew into how can I interact more with the women personally, because the podcast is me talking, but I want to create community. I want to create a conversation. And so one of the things was these small mastermind groups that I facilitate from time to time. Some of it's been coaching. It's the Facebook group, but ways where we can gather women together to talk about what's working, what's not working, where I'm struggling and where maybe you figured something out, and vice versa. So we can have these conversations and support and encourage each other and hold each other accountable to the dreams that we all, want to pursue.
Mm-hmm. So I'm intrigued as to where this came from in terms of your sort of approach, because one of the things that always strikes me when I listen to your podcast, apart from when you do interview people occasionally, is how much content you pull together for each of the shows. And I always am in awe, because I obviously cheat by just inviting people along and interviewing them, so I don't have to bring the content. It's probably more pressure in the moment, but I don't have to do all that prep work that you clearly do, and that comes across with the quality of what you put out. But also, what's been interesting listening to you just now is I recognised everything you said, because what you've said is who you are and how you always approach everything. So is this naturally how you were? Have you honed your skill over the years? Did you I don't know, think really carefully about how to do it and work to structure it? Or how you're so consistent with what you say and what you do and everything I hear about you and have done for the last however many years I've been listening to your podcast. How have you done that? How do you do that?
Well, I think some of it just has to do with living life. When I was young, as I mentioned, I have been a productivity nerd since I was very young. And for me, when I was young, productivity was about getting things done, checking things off a to-do list, writing a list and checking those things off, or doing something and then adding it to the list so I could check it off. And it was very much about production, about doing stuff. Over the course of my life, my perspective on what it means to be productive has changed. And some of that's my own experience. Some of it's conversations I've had with other women and men over the course of my life. And so a lot of what I talk about on the podcast is an outgrowth of the things that I'm thinking about in my own life, of how to make a life that matters to me. And so, there's a lot of preparation that goes into the podcast, into the episodes that I do when it's just me. But the ideas come from one of two places. Often it's something I'm thinking about myself, struggling with myself, trying to figure out, how do I do this thing? How can I make this part of my life better and more reflective of what really is important to me? Other topics come from conversations in the Facebook group or emails that I get from listeners who say, here's something I'm struggling with, or could you talk about this? And the ones I choose of those often are things that resonate with me, that I say, oh, me too. That's something I want to learn more about. And so I'll, kind of write down everything I know or think about whatever that topic is. And then I go out, onto the internet and books and things, and find out what other people have said about it. Or I'll ask my community, what do you do about this thing? How do you, get dinner on the table for your family every night when you're working all day? Or whatever the topic might be. What matters to me, what my kind of guiding principle for the podcast is to be transparent, to not try to pretend that I'm the expert, because I'm not. I'm just a fellow traveler. We're all, and I'm trying to remember who it is, where the quote came from, that, at the end of the day, we're all just trying to walk each other home. And that's that's how I live my life. And that's what I think is true, where we can pretend to be experts, we can pretend to have it all figured out, and that puts up obstacles or barriers between us and prevents us from learning from each other. Or we can be honest and say, all right, I'm doing all right in this area, but this thing over here, I just can't figure it out. I'm struggling. What do you know about that? And if we can be honest, and I don't mean wallow in our difficulties, but just be honest what works, what doesn't work, where we feel good about things and where we're struggling, that honesty opens up the opportunity for a dialogue. We can learn from each other, and in that way, we all benefit. We all have the chance to make a better life for ourselves and for the people we care about.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, that what you've just said then, a better life for ourselves, the people we care about. You used the phrase before, a life that matters, and you talked about having a meaningful life and being productive for that sort of purpose. I personally, in my business, talk about power to live more. So that's about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy, and resilience. And then living more is about getting to do more of the things you want to do and less of the things that, or less of the stuff that you don't want to do, or fewer of the things. I have to get my grammar right. and for me, it's about now having and helping people to have successful businesses whilst getting to do the things that they want to do. And it strikes me that that's some of the same sort of sentiment in what you're doing. But it's something that I think people find really difficult. There's so much, as you said, talk about, getting stuff done and sort of hustling and just doing more and being productive to get more done, rather than necessarily being productive to do more of those things that are important to you. How do you think people can identify and work towards having that meaningful life and that life that matters, rather than just getting sort of caught up in doing stuff all the time?
It really requires a lot of awareness and intentionality. I think it's easy for us to want to dive in and just start doing things. Activity feels like it's productive, but it's not necessarily productive if it's not moving you in a direction you want to go. And so I think to do that, to have a meaningful productivity, you have to take a step back and ask yourself some important questions about what matters to you. What kind of life do you want to live? What kind of, and even more important than that, I think, is what kind of person do you want to be in this world? How do you want to show up in the world? And asking yourself those questions and digging really deep into that, like what really matters to you? What would, if your life was exactly the way you wanted it to be, what would it look like, and why? Why do you want those things in your life? What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of, employee or employer do you want to be? What kind of parent do you want to be? What kind of spouse do you want to be? What kind of friend or citizen do you want to be? Thinking about those things. And I would say taking time, with a cup of coffee or tea or your beverage of choice and a notebook and pen, and sitting down and writing, just free flow writing about those things, answering those questions for yourself. That helps you identify what really matters most to you. And if you can describe for yourself what kind of life you want to live and what kind of person you want to be, then you can ask, the next question is, what needs to change to get there? And often what needs to change to get from where I am to where I want to be is not to add more activity, but to subtract some things. To recognize, what am I doing that is not taking me to this place that I say I want to go? And how can I remove those things from my life so that I have more time and energy and attention to focus on the activities, whatever that moves me in the direction that I want to be going.
Such a good point. The idea of doing less, but also, as you said, getting really clear to begin with in as to what's important. So that sort of leads on to a question about how you and some people use the words work-life balance. I don't like that word. I use work-life integration. How you integrate the two, because you've talked about how important your work is to you. You've mentioned your family. You've talked about having a meaningful life. Once you start to only focus on the things that you enjoy, but there are a lot of those things, it can actually grow back up again to being lots of activity quite easily, can't it? How do you sort of balance all those things? How do you make sure that you're not working too much or not spending enough time with the family or whatever? I mean, you've got a large family. It must be a challenge in itself to see everyone. How do you do that?
Well, sometimes I don't do it very well, Joe. I mean, that the truth is, it's not, and I agree with you, the phrase work-life balance always makes me cringe a little bit, because it implies that there's some sort of perfect balance of just the right amount of time for each thing. And I don't think that exists. No. And so for me, what it takes is constantly being aware of it, reminding myself, building time into my days and my weeks and my hours to take a step back and say, okay, is this thing I'm doing now in alignment with what I say is most important to me? Are the choices that I'm making reflective of who I say I want to be and what life I say I want to have? And, as you mentioned on the podcast and in life in general, I talk about making a life that matters, and what that means is going to be different for everybody. What kind of life you want to have is going to be different for everybody. For me, I've come to the conclusion that a life that matters almost always matters in relation to other people. We are social creatures. And so what matters to me is that I, serve my clients well, that I connect well with my family, that I, have friends that I am connected to and kind to. So I think about all those things all the time. And when I catch myself going down a path of working too much, because as a lawyer, that's so easy to do. I don't always have control over when the work comes to me, because clients need what they need when they need it. And they don't know or care that I have something going on with my family. And so I've had to learn to manage expectations, my own and other people's, and just constantly be checking in with myself of, have I made time today for the people that matter to me? Am I spending too much time working and not enough time just resting, or whatever else it is that I need to do? It's making a practice of being aware of what I'm doing with my time and asking myself the questions about whether that serves me and the people that I care about. And I know that's kind of vague, and it's not a very precise answer, but I don't think we ever get there is the thing. I think it's a lifelong journey, and some days you do better than others.
Yeah, absolutely. It was making me think of sharpening the saw, good old Stephen Covey. So I think you may say that was not very clear. I think if it's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people, that's fairly clear. Cool sort of things. You talked about from an early age being into lists and checking things off and calendars and things, and I have to say I was right there with you. That's where my interest in all this stuff started as well. How do you manage your time now? How do you know what to do, and how do you make sure you get done what you need to get done?
Well, I rely on certain tools and systems that I've put in place that have kind of developed over the years. I maintain a calendar, and I used a digital calendar for mine. So I'm a Mac geek, an Apple products geek, and so I have pretty much everything they sell. I have my iPhone and iPad and my Mac computers, and so I have a calendar that syncs among all of those. And every appointment I have, every commitment I make that is specific to a day and time, goes onto the calendar as soon as it's made, and I add relevant information into it. If it's a phone call that I'm scheduling, I put the phone number right there in the calendar entry, so that when the time comes, everything I need is right there. If it's an appointment I'm going to, the address goes in there, all that sort of thing. And I set alerts on them, so my calendar will ding at me when it's time for me to do the next thing. And I've said for years, if my calendar, I do what my calendar tells me to do. So when it dings at me, I get up and go where it tells me I'm supposed to be. And if it doesn't ding at me, I'll just keep doing whatever I'm doing and miss something. So it's very important to me to maintain that calendar. And aside from that, I have a task management system that I use, where any task that I've decided I'm going to do, goes in there. Any project that I'm working on gets broken down into tasks and it goes in there. And I rely on those two tools to make sure that the right stuff gets done when it's supposed to get done.
I'm trying to think if I remember which tool that you use. Is it Nosby, or is that something that you've used?
I have used Nosby in the past, and I really like it. I currently and for a long time have used OmniFocus as my task.
Yes. Yeah, being the Mac thing, which I did almost dip into when I finally went fully Apple, and then I thought, no, I don't need to change my task app again, because that's one of the things that I've always done in the past to procrastinate on. But so yeah, I used Todoist, which I've done for a long time, as regular listeners will know. But
yeah, and I love Todoist. I play with lots of different task managers, but I make myself stick with my primary task manager is OmniFocus, and that's where everything goes. But I play with others. My justification is, well, that's part of my job as a productivity podcasters. I have to know about these things.
Exactly.
I could easily, switch all the time. And the truth is, any tool will work as long as you use it. And so the best tool for project management, for calendar management, whatever, the best tool for you is the one you'll use. And so if it has the features you like, if you like the interface, or and the interface may be a paper calendar, or a note card on your desk that you write your tasks on. If it works for you, stick with it.
Yeah,
it's fun to play with other things, but there's the only reason to change the tool you're using is if it's not working for you anymore.
That's one of the things I've found interesting, specializing in productivity in terms of helping people, in that some sort of people's offerings, whatever they might be teaching, it's very structured, and this is the way we do it. You follow it, you use all the things that we tell you to use, and you'll get these results. So whatever that might be, whether that be, I don't know, writing a book or selling your products or whatever. But I always think with productivity that it's really difficult to say this is the way to do it, because as you've just said, it's so individual, and what works for one doesn't work for another. And we know how easy it is to sort of fall off the wagon, if you like, and stop using these things if they don't work for us. So I've never really been one for saying this is how you must do it, or this is how I do it, therefore you must do the same because it works for me, because it doesn't quite work like that, as you've said, does it?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. It's and a lot of productivity experts can get very dogmatic about the system they've developed, and it might or might not work for you. I think I'm a big fan of saying start with whatever the simplest tool or simplest system that will get the job done for you, and only get more fancy if you find that you need it. And so for a lot of people, a notebook that they carry in their purse or their pocket that they write their appointments on and their to-do list is fine. And if you are getting the things done that you want to get done and nothing's slipping through the cracks because you're using the system regularly, then that's fine. That works great, and do that. If you need something more, then there are lots of options out there, and I really do believe any of them will work for you if you use it, if you are consistent with using it. There is no perfect productivity tool. They all have pluses and minuses, but I always say, find one that you like the looks of it, and stick with it for at least 3 or 4 months, using it consistently before you decide that it doesn't work and you got to change to something else.
Yeah. So what about tools and apps that you use and recommend? And again, we'll preface that by saying they might not work for everyone else, but what are the sort of top 3 or something that you would say you couldn't live without, other than the ones you already said? Obviously, you said your calendar and OmniFocus.
Yeah, there are others. I think certainly as far as an app that I kind of I don't think I could function without. The first one that comes to mind for me is an app called Text Expander.
Yeah.
It is, it's kind of what it sounds like. It's a tool, an app, a service that lets you create abbreviations, what they call snippets. So just a few characters that will, when you type them anywhere, expand into something, some longer bit of text. So anything that you type multiple times, you can create a snippet for and save it in Text Expander, and then it's available to you wherever. So for instance, little thing for me, I am a licensed attorney in 2 different states, and I have what they call a bar number. It's my attorney number in that state. It's different in each state, and I can't remember what it is, but I don't have to, because I've set up a snippet, and I just have to type 2 or 3 characters, and it plugs that number in where I need it to be.
Yeah.
And so anything from that to email addresses that I use all the time, or phone numbers, or I use it many, many times a day, all the way up to longer, multiple paragraphs that are formatted with drop-down options that I can fill in. I get lots of emails, as I'm guessing you may, from people who want to be guests on my podcast. And I have a snippet that I've created that when I type it into an email replying to them, puts in several paragraphs that explains what I look for in a guest and what the next steps would be and all that. So I don't have to retype it every time. I just type the snippet in and it goes. And I could go on and on about that, but I won't. But it's a great tool that I use many, many, many times a day.
Yeah, I second that. Definitely.
That's one. Other than that, it's kind of some of the usual suspects. I use Dropbox a lot. That's where most of my documents are stored, so that I can it's a cloud storage solution that allows me to access, whatever I've saved there from any device anywhere in the world that I log in on. So it helps me to be more mobile, because what I have is available everywhere, and I can also share files with other people. So I have a folder for each of my coaching clients where the notes and recordings of our sessions are saved, so they can get access to them. That sort of thing.
Yeah. So I mentioned before that you really research your podcast, and for anyone listening, if you like productivity podcasts, which I'm hoping you do as you're listening to this one, I thoroughly recommend The Productive Woman. But how do you find that information, and how do you sort of keep yourself learning and moving forwards?
Well, I read a lot. Just in general, I've always been a bookworm since I was a very small child, and because I'm interested in productivity type topics and self-improvement, if you want to call it that, I read lots of books to help my keep my mind active and to learn new things. And so I get ideas from there. And when it comes to a specific topic that I'm working on for an episode, usually, as I think I said earlier, I'll sit down and kind of just free flow, write down whatever I want to say about that particular topic, kind of the points that I think I want to make or whatever I know about it. And then I'll go, just Google whatever the topic is to see what other people have said about it. And I'll read lots of articles and get resources that way. Again, for me, I like learning new things. I want to be a better person today than I was yesterday. And for me, part of that is learning from the thinking of other people. And so whether it's articles on the internet or podcasts that I listen to or YouTube videos or books that I read, and my husband will tell you to his chagrin that I have literally thousands of books in my house. And always getting more, and I'm usually reading 2 or 3 different books at a time, just just to learn new. And I love I read novels, but I really like reading nonfiction and learning from the best thinking of other people.
Yes, yeah. What's that quote about children and their education or their relative intelligence or something? And apparently it's all about how many books they have in the house when they're growing up. Your children obviously got off to a good start. There's thousands of books.
Yeah, and we had many, many more when the kids were growing up. We always tried to read to them at bedtime. And, it started out with the little short picture books, but we read, longer novels. I remember reading through the Chronicles of Narnia series when our kids were very, very young. We would read a chapter every night at bedtime. And those are, C.S. Lewis is not a simplistic writer. And so you would think that small children wouldn't necessarily follow everything that's in there, but they did. Yeah. They loved the stories, and they learned to kind of picture what was going on in the books as we read to them. And
that's something I miss. My daughter's 13 now, and it's been many a year since she's allowed me to read to her. But I remember reading like Anne of Green Gables and things like that, which is quite ironic that I think C.S. Lewis was English, wasn't he? And whoever wrote Anne of Green Gables was American. So we were obviously swapping allegiances on that one. So to finish off with my last couple of questions, which I sort of admitted before we came on that I may have possibly been influenced by the questions you ask on your podcast when I started out. So the first one is about what do you do on those days where it all goes horribly wrong, when you have a day where it hasn't gone so well. How do you deal with those?
Some days I deal with them better than others. And it's funny. I was thinking about this question because you mentioned that you would be asking it, and I jokingly have said for many years that no matter what question you ask a lawyer, the answer is always going to be the same. And that answer is, well, it depends. And it really, how I react or what I do on those days depends on what it is that didn't go well and why. Sometimes the day has gone badly because I have responded badly, whether because I'm tired or just impatient or whatever, that I didn't cope well with certain things. And if that's the situation, I give myself a little grace as being a human being. We don't always react well when things aren't going the way we want them to. But I try to learn from whatever the situation was and figure out a way to do better next time. Sometimes I have to have a talk with myself because, everything's going poorly, but I've still got work I've got to get done. And sometimes I have to just, look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, Laura, get back to work. Yeah, this sucks. Whatever this situation is sucks, but it's time to get the work done, and then you can have your breakdown later. I remind myself often when I'm struggling with what I think is a horrible situation or, whatever it might be, I try to take a step back and say, okay, you've been here before. You've gone through difficult things before and you made it through. It feels like this is going to kill you, but it won't. And so remember that time that this other thing happened that was so hard and you were able to overcome it and get done. You can do it again this time.
Yeah.
And, and I think it's important. We feel like sometimes that we're facing something that I can't do this. I can't deal with this, or I can't get this thing done that I'm supposed to do. And we don't give ourselves credit for the fact that we've accomplished things in the past that were just as difficult, or we've been through difficult situations and we got through the other side. And so reminding ourselves of that, I think, is important. And sometimes you just have to give yourself permission to walk away, get some rest, and try again the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to the last question, what about those days where you've felt like you've had the chance to live more? And as I said earlier, that's where I say it's about getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do. What do those days look like for you?
I think those are the days when I feel like at the end of the day, I can look back and say, I took care of business today. I got the things done that I know needed to get done. I kept my promises to myself and to other people. And usually those days are days that I have also connected in some way with people who are important to me. Usually when I feel really good about a day, it's because I feel like I've made the world a little better for someone. And I say the world, it may be just inside my own house. But for me, a day that I've had a chance to, as you put it, live more, usually it's because I feel like I was the kind of person I wanted to be that day. And maybe it included having time to sit with a cup of tea, because I like tea, even though I'm not British. A cup of tea and a good book, and read something and relax and enjoy the world around me. Or sometimes it's because I just knocked out a whole bunch of things off my to-do list. But either way, it usually is my attitude about it that makes the difference. If that makes sense. What's going on in my own head matters probably more than the situation or the circumstances of the day. And I know that that sounds kind of rambly, but
yeah, absolutely get that. And I think, we haven't mentioned, we started before we came on the call, just catching up a bit on the current situation. We're recording this at the right at the end of April, and it'll likely be going out at the end of May. And we were just reflecting on how things are in the world at the moment. And I think the comments you've just made about, it's how you feel about situations, I think is just so important for all of us at the moment. And obviously, some people are in just terrible situations, and that takes a massive lot of effort to sort of think positively about that. But, just even being, unable to go out, those of us who work from home, normally it's quite a normal situation. I'm not used to normally having the rest of the family here, but it's about finding those sort of small things, those things that you can enjoy and be grateful for, regardless of whatever else is going on, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's not, I think gratitude is so important, and it doesn't mean dismissing or pretending that tough things aren't happening. It's not even about pretending that you don't feel lousy about what's happening, but making a choice to look for something to be grateful for. Because I really do believe that in any situation, there is something there. If you look for it, there is something there to be grateful for. And for me personally, looking for that makes a huge difference. As I've said, as a lawyer by training, part of my job is to look for what can go wrong and figure out a way to, avoid it or deal with the things that can go wrong. And so my inclination, maybe by nature and by training, is to look for what's wrong to try to fix it. I have to intentionally look for what's good, look for something to be thankful for. And when I do that, my day, my life, my world is much, much better.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. It's been so lovely interviewing you, especially as I hoped for years to invite you on the podcast and didn't actually ask you. And it's a good lesson in just asking, because you're here now.
Well, it's been so much fun talking with you. I'm honored that you asked.
And so tell people how they can find out more about you and get in touch with you.
Well, I think the easiest place to go would be to the website for the podcast, and that's at theproductivewoman.com. And there's a contact page there that you can click on to send me a message. There's, buttons to connect with me on social media and via email and different things like that. But probably the fastest way that I can say is just go to that website, and you'll find out a bit more about who I am, maybe more than you want to know, and also how you can get in touch with me. And I love hearing from people. It's one of the best things about that podcast is the opportunities it's given me to connect with people all over the world and make new friends, which I just love.
Lovely. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com / in this case 160, then you'll be able to find them there. And this week I just want to mention Zoom. I did a training session last Friday for a local Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development group in Kent, talking about how we use Zoom, and we had a bit of a collaborative learning session where we talked about the technology but also about some of the ways that you can interact with people and engage people in an online session. And it prompted me to then get some training up onto my membership site, Power to Live More Calm, which is a series of videos showing you how to use Zoom. I guess I could have done that early on in the lockdown, but I've done it now. So many people are using it. I had an email from a neighbour the other day telling me that she was about to attempt to Zoom with some friends today, so she was a bit apprehensive about that. She's in her 70s and had never done it before, so amazing how many people are using these online tools that haven't in the past. And the other thing I've added to the membership site this week is a planner all around content marketing, so a download to be able to work through all the sorts of analysis and the work and thoughts that you put into creating a content marketing plan. And I'm also just working on a productivity and time management planner to add to the site this week as well. I've got loads of content to go up there, and it's been interesting that we're in, week 10 or something of being in isolation, and I finally feel that I'm starting to get on top of some of the stuff that I've been doing. It's been a hectic few weeks, so I'm hoping to get a lot more content onto the membership site in the coming weeks, so I'll keep you posted on what those things are as well. If you are interested in joining the site, I've actually set up a special discount code for podcast members. So basically, if you go to powertolivemore.com powertolivemore.com / powertolivemore.com / get calm and use the discount code podcast, then you get the first month for £1 before it goes to the £37 a month that it is when you're a gold member. So that's the membership site. And also just to remind you that Counterpoint Networking is back on Monday. We didn't have one this week because it was a bank holiday, which confused a few people. I'm not sure people really know what day of the week it is at the moment. So it's on Monday, the 1st of June, and we've changed the format slightly. It's just for an hour from 2 till 3, and I'll be hanging around until 4 o'clock for anyone who wants to carry on the conversation and spend a bit longer. But we're going to keep the main bulk of the meeting between 2 and 3 every Monday afternoon. So you can get more information and register for that, or rather RSVP as it's called on the site, by going to counterpointnetworking.co.uk. And the one for next week's show is counterpointnetworking.co.uk /200601. Again, the show notes for this week's show are at powertolivemore.com /160, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.